Feyerabend, and he's famous for his methodological anarchy. That's what I display now, speaking about different things which do not correspond to the theme of my lecture. Yes, this is called methodological anarchy. So, because I am supposed to follow some method in teaching, okay? You understand? Method. Maria Zaychinoka. You know that's what is method. Yes? Uh, you understand my joke. So I'm sort of this like a stream of consciousness. This is not a method. But we have this figure, who is in the program, and we have today the 12th lecture, and it is devoted to the 12th question of the program. And here we will find this man, this philosopher of science, Austrian by birth, by nationality, Paul Feyerabend. He was born in 1924 and died in 1994. Also, there are beautiful interview with him in English language and in German. So those of you who understand German can enjoy the German interview in YouTube. Those who are those who know English, they will listen to the English interview with him also on YouTube. So you just should dial Paul Feyerabend in YouTube and just search, and immediately you will find those both interviews. They were made when Feyerabend was already, they were made in 1993, so the year before the death of Paul Feyerabend. So he was, maybe he didn't even anticipate that he will soon die. So he's rather active and humorous, and I think in good moods. And he speaks about his life, his achievements, his connections, his friends, his way in science, in philosophy of science. And if you listen to the English interview, you will see that he speaks with thick German accent. So this is not perfect English. He didn't master or didn't want to master American or English pronunciation, and you can recognize a German. Well, I recognize, I think you will also. Maybe if you listen to my English, you will recognize Russian, okay? Maria Zachinoka, yes?
Yes.
Yes, you can recognize Russian. So at first I was a little bit sort of, uh, well, maybe felt some um, shame that I'm speaking in such imperfect English. But when I listened to Feyerabend's interview, I said to myself, not so bad after all. Teacher eminent science, perfect English, just normal. So I was a little bit consoled. Yes, um, you understand. So I received kind of a consolation. Well, now a little bit. So he was was not in very perfect state. I mean, in very the affairs, the state affairs were from ideal, because also First World War, um, the First World War Empire, Austro-Hungarian Empire, which comprised or which consisted of many states which were united in one empire. This Czechoslovakia, uh, part of Poland, with Krakow, the famous Polish city. At that time, it belonged to the Austrian Empire. Western Ukraine, with such cities as Lviv, now it's Lviv or Lvov. At that time, it was called Lemberg and belonged to the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Also, Croatia, Hungary, um, Slovenia, and some other territories, part of Romania. So it was quite a big um, state in the center of Europe, very rich, very, uh, I would say, in cultural tradition, it was also very famous with Vienna Opera, for example, for its universities in Prague, in Budapest, in Vienna, in Krakow, all were very prominent. There were famous architectural monuments. So it was a flourishing country. But after the First World War, it was divided in separate states. Czechoslovakia was independent, Hungary was independent, Slovenia and Croatia were now parts of Yugoslavia. And so, well, nothing. Krakow went to Poland, Lemberg and Lemberg also. So nothing remained of this big empire except small Austria, well, more or less in the same Germany as now. Economically ruined with great inflation, unemployment. A lot of people died, were injured during the war, and a lot of children became fatherless or like and mothers had to work to provide for the family, so children were more or less thrown into the streets. So it was not a happy country. Why I insist on that? Because Feuerabend, shortly before his death, wrote a very sincere autobiography, which is called Killing Time. Well, it's interesting, uh, this expression, to kill the time. Maria Molchak, yes? You know?
Yes, of course.
Yes, so killing time, it's mean just speaking nonsense, doing nothing, or just being not very serious. So it means that he came to this task of writing an autobiography without serious intentions. Well, it can be compared with other autobiographies which were very serious, like the autobiography of Saint Augustine, Confessions, where Saint Augustine was very serious because he wanted to write about his conversion. So there were like a plot in his autobiography that's coming from darkness to light. Well, there was no such plot in Paul Feyerabend's autobiography, Killing Time. So that's why he said that it was just he had nothing to do, so he decided to write an autobiography. Okay, he didn't want to teach anybody anything. He didn't want to just tell people how smart he was or how perfect he was or how saintly he was a personality. He was very, I would say, outspoken about his deficiencies. For example, he spoke about the period when he served in the Austrian army during the Second World War and was a very fervent Nazi. So it was not very, I would say, um, uh, just it was no compliment for him, and he understood it perfectly that this Nazi past was not very a thing to be proud of. But he didn't want to conceal it and to say that no, he was anti-Nazi throughout his whole life. No, he said sincerely, yes, I was young and I believed in this ideology, and I considered it to be some light into the in the darkness, and even taught this ideology to soldiers or other officers. But well, then I got disillusioned, of course, because we lost the war. So I changed sort of my convictions. Well, so he was very sincere. Okay. Also, he was badly injured during the war, and there was a period when he was almost completely paralyzed and couldn't walk. But little by little, he managed by exercise or by drugs. No, I mean not drugs in a literal sense, but just by some medicine, some maybe operations. He received the ability to walk, but he suffered from pains throughout all his life and was constantly on painkillers. So he couldn't marry. Oh, he could marry, but he couldn't have children because something went wrong with his reproductive function. Also, he was very I would say, outspoken on that subject also. So he didn't want to conceal almost anything of which people are sometimes ashamed. So he is speaking very, very plainly, and that makes it, I think, a bestseller and kind of a monument of the time. Also, of course, nobody put into suspicion his qualities as a philosopher. So it was not I who inserted Paul Feyerabend into the program of our course. It was the decision of the Department of Philosophy. So I'm not an author of this program. So I just received it. So Feyerabend is, I think, indispensable for every course in the philosophy of science. And also he taught the most part of his career, he taught in Berkeley in California, in one of the most prestigious universities of the world. And so I think that's enough just for his credentials, okay? But if you read his books or even his autobiography, you can have some questions or even reservations, or maybe even be disillusioned somehow because you don't understand what he's aiming at, what is his program. With you remember we spoke about Karl Popper, we spoke about Wittgenstein, we spoke about Thomas Kuhn, and with them it was more or less clear what they wanted, what was their philosophy, what was their approach to history of science. Now, if you read Feyerabend, especially his first book, Against Method, which was published in 1975, uh, maybe like um, by oh, I'm sorry, method against, I will write again, method. Okay, now it's better. So, what is method? There's a question in the beginning of our course. What is scientific method? You remember René Descartes and his work, which is called Discourse on the Method, uh, or in French, Discours sur la méthode. So it's more or less the same, only the pronunciation is different. So for Descartes, it was very important thing. I'm sorry.
We can't hear you. You are not audible, sir.
Phone call from my mother, so I couldn't. Uh, I had to answer. So let's continue with Rene Descartes. So it was a very interesting idea that Rene Descartes praised very much his scientific method. So the first step was just to doubt everything, sort of create like a clear ground the new theory should be built. So don't put in the foundations some pre-existing theories which could be wrong. So doubt everything and start from the very beginning. And when you start, you should start from very clear, very sort of uh, unconditional or contradiction free assertions, just always sort of correcting yourself or analyzing your theory on screening it on possible trying to find possible mistakes or unclear portions, just to build a clear theory which will lead to maybe untrivial results. That's the same method which was used by Euclid in his geometry. So nothing special. So mathematics, logic, clearness or clarity. Even now we say Cartesian clarity. So that was recommended for all the science. And the second method was the method of Francis Bacon, this empirical method to test everything, to confirm every theory by experiment, to try to find ex- mm, just to create new experiments, just to find the secrets of nature by observing it, even in some special circumstances created by the researcher himself, like the experiment of Halley, for example. Well, that was it was thought that nobody can question these achievements of, say, great philosophers and methodologists like René Descartes and Francis Bacon. So it seemed that the case of Descartes is hopeless. That how can we sort of object against following some method in our research? But nevertheless, if we analyze situation a little bit more deeply, we'll see that there are such ideas as, say, insight, insight or intuition, which were not new. These ideas were developed by Blaise Pascal, for example, a French philosopher of the 17th century, Blaise Pascal, and well, to a certain extent, uh, mm, by French philosopher Henri Poincaré, of whom we spoke when we spoke about second positivism. Poincaré. Maybe I wrote his name correctly. Well, if not, I apologize. So So Henri Poincaré and Blaise Pascal were both mathematics. And with mathematicians, the role of intuition, insight, a sense of a beauty of the theory, you understand, symmetry, this plays a great role. So mm, mathematicians themselves even can't explain why they sort of how to say suggest this or that solution or this or that formula. It just appears to them, and after this insight, after this intuition, they just try to prove what was somehow revealed to them. You understand? Revealed.
Really.
Revealed. If you don't know this word, Mehdi, reveal, revelation. You understand?
No, maybe I didn't know that this word in English.
Well, it's like a revelation which Prophet Muhammad received. This revelation,
Ah,
like insight.
I see.
You
And
see,
in some philosophical thought, in for example, proving some theorem, first of all, we do some simulation.
yes, of course, but
And
when
after
you
that, we guess something. After that, we try to prove that with mathematical.
yes, yes. So of course, nobody says that you shouldn't prove anything. Yes, of course, and Paul Feyerabend was not against logic, but he was against method because he said that these insights, these intuitions, these revelations, they come spontaneously without any preparation and somewhat like unexpectedly, I would say, um, well, spontaneously, you understand? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so you cannot just understand why this or that person developed this or that intuition. Well, for example, Copernicus. This is an example which Paul Feyerabend produces. So Copernicus, um, he had no proofs of the how to say of the truthfulness of his well of his heliocentric system, except its beauty. So for him was this revelation that it is like more beautiful and more elegant solution for answering different questions. Well, I remind you, maybe you have forgotten that with Copernicus, Copernicus solved the major problem that remained in Ptolemaic astronomy. The problem is the difference between so-called inward and outward planets, the inner and outer planets. The inner planets are those planets which are in between the orbit of the Earth and then the Sun. These are Mercury and Venus. And of course, it was known from observations, and perhaps you can also observe that Venus moves away from the sun. It follows the sun. So it is that's therefore called a morning
Helico
star. Yeah, the
is
morning
something
star.
related to helicentric.
I'm sorry.
I will write
Yes.
for that word.
How do you call it in Arabic? Uh, um, Morning star. Okay. So Venus had this name of morning star. Okay. Why? Because heliocentrism. Yes. So why was it called the morning star? Because it is never far from the sun. Well, not far from the sun as 45 degrees. You understand? So uh, well, and before the sunrise, you will see this Venus just near the place where the sun would rise. So in the east. So you will see this star, and that from that star you will understand that perhaps soon you will see the rising sun. And with Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, it's quite the other way around. They can be found in every almost every place on the heavenly sphere, sometimes far from the sun, sometimes more close to the sun, but they are not sort of somehow tied or connected with the sun as Venus and Mercury are. So it was like a kind of a puzzle or a mystery with Ptolemy. And well, Ptolemy himself was an astrologer, so he believed that the more complex is the motion of the planets, the more the more precisely it corresponds with the complexity of the human destiny here on Earth. So, well, you can say the trajectory of Mars or Jupiter or Saturn is very like mm, how to say mm, not so understandable. It's very complex because sometimes these planets stop and seem to move in another directions and make some loops. Yes, so well, for Copernicus, it was not beautiful, but for Ptolemy, it was normal because he said, well, our destiny here on earth is also somehow erratic. So we are sometimes making loops. Also, we are becoming rich and then again poor. We are happy and then we're unhappy and then we're happy again. Okay, so that's from the point of view of an astrologist or a person who believes in the connection between heaven and earth and say destinies of man and movements of heavenly bodies. This is normal. This doesn't create any problem for them. And well, you know that planets are called erratic stars because planeta is erratic in Greek. So there's nothing strange that they err in their motions. Well, but Copernicus thought that his idea of heliocentrism, when all the planets move on circular orbits more or less sort of equally with equal velocity, and that these loops are only sort of illusions caused by the Earth motion and the relative effect when, say, the Earth somehow outruns the outer planets, then they seem to move in the opposite direction. Well, all these like said, all these ideas were pure intuitions. They were not founded on some method, and this was like a vision. So you see, Copernicus had a vision that he considered his theory to be like very beautiful, and even he writes this in his book on the uh, revolutions of the heavenly spheres. He writes it, and he says that God, the creator who created this world, this universe, he decided to put this lantern or sun in the center of the universe because it is most beautiful, and this place for a luminary source of light whom he considered sun to be the source of light in the universe. He considered that this central place which is given to the sun in his heliocentric system is most proper. So he was guided by aesthetic um, principles and aesthetic arguments. Okay, so there was nothing of a method. The same thing you can apply Mendeleev's table. So why periodicity in a system of elements? Why don't just leave them alone as they are? Why should we seek for some symmetry, for some like rhyme in these elements, chemical elements? Well, and of course, we can understand that the main suppositions of both Copernicus and Mendeleev were wrong. With Copernicus, what was wrong was this idea that the planets move on circular orbits. The reality was more complex. The orbits proved to be elliptical. Okay, so Copernicus was quite ignorant of that. And that's why his theory didn't correspond to reality. The same with Mendeleev. He thought that this periodicity is somehow connected with the atomic weights of the elements, but he was quite um, an error in this respect. The position of the element in the Mendeleev table is connected not with his atomic weight, but with its atomic weight, but it is connected with the charge of its nucleus. So uh, um, Mendeleev was quite ignorant about that, in the same way as Copernicus was ignorant about ellipses. The same way, of course, Mendeleev didn't know anything about electrons, nucleus, nuclei, or the charge of the nucleus, or protons or neutrons. This was all not unknown to Mendeleev, if you understand, because this idea was suggested in 1869, before and you know that proton and found much later, only in the beginning of the 20th century. Well, the same we can say about Niels Bohr and his explanation of the planetary model of the atom. So, well, everywhere the first insight is imperfect and maybe even contradicts to some facts, but well, there's something irresistible in it, in this vision, and so the scientists somehow follow it with some zeal, you understand, or with some faith in the truthfulness of their concept. And well, science, of course, pays tribute to these insights. We don't say that Copernicus was wrong, and we don't blame him that his planets moved on uh, circles and not on ellipses. So this was not his fault. It was the imperfection of his theory, which basically was right. Also, of course, we don't think now that the sun is the source of light or like a lantern in the universe. We don't believe in the universe of Copernicus or spherical universe, and we don't believe that the stars are on the same sphere as Copernicus believed. If you just look at his model of the universe, you will be shocked what seems childish in his idea. But still, we praise Copernicus as a revolutionary. And also, we praise Mendeleev because his idea of periodicity is right. Only he explained it perhaps in an imperfect way. That's what Paul Feyerabend wanted to stress, that there is no method in these epoch-making discoveries. They are sometimes done on pure intuition and not by following some method. Well, you know Francis Bacon and his empirical method, and it is interesting that he was against Copernican system throughout all his life. You remember Francis Bacon was born in 1561 and died in 1626. So a lot of people were already understood the importance of the Copernican system. For example, Galileo, Kepler, Mestlin, Rheticus, and other. Even Gilbert, an Englishman who wrote the book on the magnet, he understood the importance of the Copernican system. Only Francis Bacon was obstinate and obstinately rejected this Copernican idea because he understood that it cannot be experimentally or empirically proved. There was no experiment that could prove the validity of the Copernican system. Well, as for the data of the observations of the stars, so Tycho Brahe or Ptolemy could explain them even better than Copernicus. Well, that's the idea that these visionaries, these those who how have this insight, they are sometimes not understood by those people who insist on some methods. Well, the same was the say the drawback of Cartesian system of René Descartes. He introduced this idea of a vortex. So he explained the motion of the planets by his theory of vortices. You know vortex. Those who study hydrodynamics know what it is, yes? Vortex, yes? Maria Molchanova, no problem with this word.
Uh, I suppose I will Google it.
Vortex, this is like a kind of a rotational motion of, say, water. Vortex. Mehdi,
Okay, I get it.
you get it? Yes?
Yeah,
So these are his
yeah,
idea
yeah,
that
I'm here.
like all matter, because he didn't believe in vacuum, he considered all matter continuous. So he explained it as like a great fluid. And in this fluid, there are vortices. Vortices is a plural of vortex. Vortices. So plural, yes? So these vortices are everywhere. And he explained the planetary motions in this idea of vortices. But this explanation was led him nowhere because, of course, he couldn't explain elliptical characters of planetary motions by vortices. Because what is that elliptical vortex? It's just nonsense, okay? So his explanation was very, very naive and unproductive. And as for Newton, Newton explained that he had a intuition of this unity of the force which creates gravity on Earth, by which, say, an apple falls from the tree, and the force that causes the moon to move around Earth. So he has this vision, you understand? And this vision was completely lacking with René Descartes, because Descartes couldn't understand how gravity is connected with planetary motions. So in order to sort of unite these two concepts, the concept of the elliptic motion of the planet and the concept of gravity, it was needed some insight which is said that he had it when he was 21 years, very young at that time. There was the year of the great plague, yes, plague, yes. I'm I always have difficulty with pronouncing this word. In Russian, it's чума. Maria Molchanova. Plague, yes?
Yes, it is called as plague.
Plague, you say plague?
Yeah.
Oh, well, you never know how to pronounce it correctly. Well, but
Yes, in British English, plague. In American
well,
English,
you
plague.
see this, you see this is difficult word for pronouncing, but it means in fact contagious disease. Yes, so this was a great plague in London, and so Newton, in this year of this epidemic, he had his insights. Maybe somebody will have their insights during the COVID epidemic. Who knows? You see, because sometimes a disaster can call also mobilization of mental activity of a person. Okay, you never know. Also, we know that Newton was a devoted alchemist, and he praised very much his experiments in alchemy. And when he was depressed after a fire consumed his laboratory, and all his results of his alchemical experiments died in the flames. So for Newton himself, it was very disastrous. So we can say what trifles were in the mind of such a genius, yes? But Feuerabend say, well, that's life. That's uh, because Newton was a man of intuitions. Of course, he was an able mathematician and so on, but all his mathematics and all his theory of gravity was a product of one or two or three intuitions, okay? And that explains also his passion for alchemy and his passion for commenting some obscure Christian books like the book of Daniel or a book of Apocalypse or Revelation of St. John. He spent a lot of time commenting on these books, and these commentaries are published. You can find them in Google Books and read them if you have enough taste for that, you see. But maybe if you are not interested in theology, they would seem to you very boring and senseless, okay? But they were written by Newton, not by other men, okay? So how can we combine these, you see, different approaches in one man? So it seems that he's torn by some kind of a schizophrenia, but this wasn't the case. This is what Feuerabend says. This is the not methodologically perhaps that was lack of methodology, but there was enough insights in the life of Newton. Well, also we can say that the philosophy of Spinoza, for example, was also kind of an insight, this pantheism of Spinoza. So in every great theory, you can find this basic idea, which is explained by some insight. And around this idea, which is the core of the, say, of the scientific program, there arises then the so-called protective belt. This is the idea not of Feuerabend, this is the idea of his friend Imre Lakatos, of whom we'll speak later and during our next lecture. I'm not sure if we'll have lecture on the 27th, on the 26th of December, Anshita. Will you
It's
have?
up to you. If you want to take one more lecture, then we can arrange it.
Well, I'm not sure because you will have to prepare for your examinations. So, well, it depends. I will ask Masha Kaplina, and we'll decide about the next lecture next Saturday, okay? So if Masha Kaplina has nothing against, so we can make the next lecture, and it will be devoted to Imre Lakatos, a famous Hungarian historian and philosopher of science and a friend of Paul Feyerabend. So Imre Lakatos also just took this idea of some insight, which he called the core, the hard core of the scientific program. And this is an insight, but then this insight is attacked from every part. If you had your own insights, for example, Angel Sierra, you can understand how your insights are attacked by all your peers, your supervisors, everybody. They say, "Oh, no, that's nonsense. This is just forget about it. It's all just um, chatter or say abracadabra." You understand? So sometimes, but it happens with everybody. And even it happened with Wolfgang Pauli when he made the presentation. Niels Bohr said to him, "Your theory is crazy, but in order to, we should find, I doubt whether it is true. I mean, whether the problem is whether it is crazy enough to be true." Okay, so all theories are more or less crazy. So, and I think the Pauli principle, this idea that fermions cannot occupy the say the level with exactly identical quantum numbers, is also an insight. Yes, Pauli principle, that there are two kinds of particles: those particles which have how to say uh, mm, not integer spin, but say 1/2, then they are called fermions. And if they have integer spins, then or no spin, then they are called bosons. So this also a kind of an intuition. Everywhere we find these intuitions, and they form the core of your say program. But then you have to somehow defend this core. Also, it is the same with philosophers, with Marx, with Freud. They also had to defend their intuitions, like Freud had to defend his idea of Oedipus complex. So they try to make a kind of a protective belt around their intuitions. So, but this is not method. This is like a strategy of defending your protective, what it means. So it not that you receive this core idea by some method. It is an intuition. The method we apply only, or if it can be called a method, you apply only when you protect your intuition from attacks from outside. Okay, that is well, because they were friends, they discussed these ideas, so they wanted to write the book together, Lakatos and Feyerabend. And they planned to write a book together, two authors, like Marx and Engels, okay? But suddenly, unfortunately, Lakatos died in 1974. So this part, which was supposed to be written by Lakatos, never appeared. So Feyerabend did what he could. He took his own part, which is only, of course, half of this book, because the book was planned uh, like with the title Pro and Against Method. So Lakatos would speak about because Lakatos still insisted on the validity of scientific method, and Feyerabend was his opponent. So this book, which unfortunately never appeared, but now it appeared after the death of Feyerabend. There was published his correspondence with Lakatos. So it was published not long ago. So this book is like the idea of, well, somehow an image of the book which never appeared. But if you study their, say, correspondence of Lakatos and Feyerabend, then you can get the whole idea of what this book would have been about. But it appeared only this like part which was the point of view of Feyerabend, and that is because it is was a kind of academic point of view, and it was planned that Lakatos would somehow balance it by his arguments. So this book became a kind of a, I would say, mm, also a provocation, and aroused a great discussion among scientists. Scientists were not very happy with that book, but they could do nothing because this book coincided with so-called anarchist movement among the students of Berkeley University and other universities. You remember the times. Well, you are still young, but your fathers perhaps know that it was a time of tumultuous time, or time of troubles, when there were demonstrations, student demonstration against the war in Vietnam. Also, there were demonstration in favor of more civil rights for colored people, for women, for homosexuals. So it was a period of real troubles and real collisions in the society. There were hippies everywhere. 1974, drugs became popular part of the so-called youth culture, the rock music, everything. And if you will find a method in rock music, I would be very grateful to you if you will show me where's the method in Deep Purple or Led Zeppelin or the Beatles. My dear Vishnu, do you agree with me if there are any method or any rationality in rock music?
It's a hard question, I think.
Yeah, but you understand that this is a kind of a unity of culture. So
Yes.
philosophy should imitate art, and art should imitate philosophy. So there appeared the philosophy which corresponded to the art, say abstract art in abstract music also, and it was called postmodernism. There was like uh, how to say, the construction of all values, like in Nietzsche we find. And the philosophy of Paul Feyerabend very much corresponded or was in tune, say, in with the postmodernist movement. A spokesman for postmodernism, French philosopher Jacques Derrida, spoke about the criticism, the how to say, he criticized so-called logocentrism. Logocentrism. What is that? Mm. Logocentrism. It's just rationality of all modern culture. So postmodernism defied or challenged this rationality, okay, in favor of pluralism of opinions and perhaps other kinds of logic. You understand? This is the important thing, logocentrism, criticism of logos. And also there was this criticism of so-called big narratives. Um, well, if you are, as say, a rationalist, you can write a big book and ask people narratives and ask people to read it. Well, I can write a big book, say, and I will say, Maria Zachinoka, please read this book from beginning to end. You will say, well, I have no time, professor. I can't read such large texts. Well, I say they are lazy. You are just lazy. You should be expelled from the university because you can't read, you can't make a dissertation. So, but now they say no. This is not the question of laziness. It's a question of, say, uh, belief. I don't believe that in these big narratives I can find something productive, something which will sort of feed me. Okay, so I think these big books are just written by people who are conceited, who are proud, who are somehow following their own perhaps illusions or their so-called methods, and they just try to impose on me their ideas, and in this way they exercise power. So these people have a lust for power. All these authors of big books, of bulky books, of big narratives, they are just mad for power. That's why they write volumes and volumes. Okay, so this was of course, was a position of postmodernists, and you can see very well that the main idea or insight of Paul Feyerabend corresponded very much with these postmodernist tenets of postmodernist principles of postmodernist philosophy. Well, that made Paul Feyerabend a very attractive figure, and his students didn't let him go. So they insisted, well, in Western universities and partly now here also, you have this like feedback from the students, course evaluation, it is called. Masha Kaplina doesn't ask you to write course evaluation, yes? But in Skoltech, for example, where I teach, are every year, well, I have only one semester of this concise course of history and philosophy of science. So after this course is ended, I always receive a feedback from students, this called course evaluation. Of course, it is optional, so a student can just don't can decide not to take part in it, but most students do say something. Well, there are some negative things which are perhaps painful for you to read about yourself, that you are clumsy, that you know not very well English, that you don't make a lot of presentations. Well, you can also object it now, Maria Zachinoka, yes? I don't have presentations, yes? Maybe it makes difficult for you to listen to me. Well, there was one of the objections in Skoltech. Well, that I'm arrogant, and that when I'm examining the students, I look at my smartphone. Well, there's a lot of objections, but there are also a lot of compliments and even admiration. So, well, it depends. I think that Paul Feyerabend was immensely popular in Berkeley, and that is what was one of the reasons for him be continuing his course. And while he was teaching in Berkeley, and Berkeley is famous for very intelligent students, so while he was doing this lecturing work, he invented more and more proofs in favor of his sort of position, and also he analyzed the critical responses to his work against method, and that's how was born his second book, which is called Science and Society. Well, this book is so provocative that you cannot even find the complete version of it in English. Science in the Free Society. Well, if you try, maybe you can find it. Yes, you can buy it But for free, you will not have the PDF of it. You can have PDF of against method, but not science the free society. Russian translation for those who know Russian, like I think Maria Molchanova knows Russian, yes?
Yes.
So you can read it in Russian, in free domain. So you can read it in Russian and enjoy it. But you will see from this book, if you read it, that it is very provocative. Well, just maybe some people of whom he speaks can be just very offended. But and he lost some of his friends. For example, he lost his friend Joseph Agassi. He's now still living. He's a professor in Israel, Joseph Agassi. Well, you will see how um, Agassi, how it can be that a Jew will make friendship with a former Nazi. Well, at that time, there was like a purification of memories, and everyone understood that you have to forgive. And so Joseph Agassi forgave uh, Feyerabend his past Popper, and Joseph Agassi reminiscences how they returned home from Popper exhausted, but somehow also in kind of an ecstasy, and exchanged the pieces and were well. So this was a real friendship between Joseph Agassi and Paul Feyerabend. Well, Joseph Agassi was born in 1927, and he's still living, so he's in his 90s. Well, maybe if he retains his memory and mental ability, still can write memoirs, but he, of course, wrote enough, I think. So if you just read Joseph Agassi and find these places in his work where he mentions Feyerabend, you will see some details, very interesting. So they were friends, but then Joseph Agassi spoke harshly against this, and Paul Feyerabend retorted, or sort of answered his criticism also in a very angry way. So after that book, Free Society, which was published, I think, in 1982, friendship was broken and they didn't meet again. Or, well, so, well, you see, he was a difficult personality. 1978. I mean, the book Science in the Free Society, yes? Maybe I'm mistaken. I always just have this um, just slips memory. Forgive me, please. But it can be easily I can be easily falsified. But when the theory can be falsified, it means that it is scientific. Yes, you remember our lecture. So when and I can be falsified, then my theory is scientific. So it can be either proved or disproved. So when I'm just I'm in error, this means that I'm following the right path, only making mistakes, which can be, of course, very easily detected, but I think it doesn't sort of jeopardize all the whole initiative of mine. Well, so 1978, they appeared this second book, and so now I'm afraid to say the date, but somewhere in the 80s appeared this third book, A Farewell to Reason. Well, this is not a book like, this is a collection of mm, different articles of Paul Feyerabend united by some, well, foreword and notes. A Farewell to Reason. What is that? It's of the same theme or of the same intuition. Also, it is kind of a continuation of this postmodernist attack on reason, on logocentrism, okay? And also it is an allusion to the novel by Ernest Hemingway, Farewell to Arms. To Arms. This is the book by Hemingway. You understand Hemingway? If don't, Ernest Hemingway. I'm sorry. Well, maybe this one, yes? Hemingway. Maria Zachinoka. Did you read Ernest Hemingway or not? Well,
I
in my
haven't. I
you
think
haven't.
yes.
Well,
There is
he was
also, but I don't know. His surname is Hemingway.
well. You see, Farewell to Arms. We were reading it in school when we're studying English. It was like our home reading book. You see, this is about the First World War. Reminiscences of Ernest Hemingway. He took part in the First World War as an American volunteer. He was a medical, like brother or medical assistant on the front, Italian, Austrian front. Okay, well, so it's interesting that Feuerabend took this um, novel of Hemingway because Hemingway fought against Austrians. So it seems that he was on the side of Italians. But if you read this novel, it is anti-military. That's why it explains its title. The title hints on that you should sort of stop this war, stop military activity, stop wars, and try to live in peace. So why a farewell to reason? So reason is kind of arms. Well, this is an interesting metaphor. That reason is well, but this is very postmodernist because the postmodernists, especially French philosopher Michel Foucault, he insisted on this thesis that man is aggressive by his nature, and man is mad for power, every man. And well, this was also the thesis of Alfred Adler, once a teacher of Karl Popper, that every man seeks power, seeks, and he defends himself also with words, like with arms. This is a metaphor of the English philosopher Thomas Hobbes, already in the 17th century. Thomas Hobbes wrote that men use language as animals use their teeth to bite. Animals bite with their teeth, and people bite each other with their words. Okay, so they use words in self-defense or in aggression. Okay, so they can also use reason for the same purpose. If you want to establish your power, you apply to reason, and you want to outsmart or defeat your opponent in reasoning. So all reasoning is aimed at disproving or defeating your opponent. And it means showing that your opponent is a fool. is a unreasonable creature, that he is in error, that he is um weaker intellectually than you are. And that means that you should be given the post, say, of a lecturer or of a scientist in this laboratory. So this reason is used for survival, for competition for in life. And that is why reason can become aggressive. And that's why it can be compared with arms. And that's why this Feyerabend took this, say, um, how to this title. So he wanted to stress that reason can be not only like a beacon of light, sort of, uh, but it can also be uh, something negative, something aggressive, something inhumane even. And people should stop quarreling, should stop arguing, and try to establish some consensus, understanding that perhaps this reasoning leads people nowhere, because there were a lot of examples starting from Francis Bacon and René Descartes, how following blindly one's method could lead a good scientist into bad conclusions. Okay, so this is also an important book. I mean, it is not so important in its contents because it's just a collection of different articles or, say, uh, interventions in certain conferences, which uh, uh, in which Paul Feyerabend took part. But the I think what the most important in this book is its title, which shows the position of Feyerabend in um, in relation to reason, but not only reason. Of course, he is reasonable, but in certain perhaps misuse of reason. And now he wrote a book, Killing Time. This is his autobiography. It was written in shortly before his death. And also, I recommend you again to listen to his interview on YouTube. So it's easy and you can find it. And there you will see the man. He's just in reality. You will see that he is very sympathetic, not at all ugly. Even in his 70, he was 70 when he died, but he was still more or less good looking, and I think quite reasonable, not an idiot, okay? As you perhaps can imagine, a man who speaks against reason, against method, you can perhaps imagine that he's kind of an idiot, okay? But you will see that he's not at all an idiot. He has his own view on everything, and perhaps it's worth to pay attention to his position. Well, this is what I think. So that's basically all that I wanted to say about Feyerabend. And well, I think more or less this is the true picture of him and his contribution to the philosophy of science. So he stands somehow in opposition to other three figures, Lakatos, Lakatos, because in Hungarian surnames, S is pronounced as sh on the end, Lakatos. And you will see that Feyerabend, when mentioning Lakatos in his interview, he pronounces this surname in this way. And also, also Thomas Kuhn and he's in opposition to Thomas Kuhn and in opposition to Karl Popper. So he's a loner, okay? He takes a position against everybody. So not only against method, but against the majority of his colleagues. But still he's interesting, even in his unique position that he takes. Well, that's all, Anshita. So I'm saying goodbye to you. Thank you for hosting us. I thank everybody for listening to me, and hope to meet you next Saturday. Well, I will just make an announcement after consulting Masha Kaplina. I will make an announcement whether the lecture will take place or not, okay? It depends on your timetable.
Thank you.
So, but never in any way we'll meet in January again, because you have the year course. So you don't, and in only Maria Zaychinoka and Maria Molchanova, they end, yes? Or you will continue in the spring semester? I don't know exactly.
Even I don't know. I don't have any idea related to
Don't know
this.
exactly too.
Okay.
We have another semester, I think, like we have another
Yes.
semester to attend.
Yes, but you are, well, anyway, I'm going to continue this course because I have touched only half of the questions which are in the program. So
But
I think, yes,
you have 12 questions today. Can you just
yes,
write it and send it to us so that we can know what are those questions?
I've sent you the program, so all the questions are in the program, but I can again send you only the questions, not just for you to more easily understand. So I will just copy the questions themselves and send it to you via WhatsApp, I think. Okay,
And can
Anshita?
you tell us about